Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Judy and I'm passionate about travel, history, places, and people, and how they affect one another. Today we're stopping in Toulon, France. You might not think there's much to see in a big naval port, especially compared to nicer places like Nice or Monaco or even Marseille, all of which are just down the coast. But there almost always is something to see and do anywhere where people live. I had the advantage of being introduced to the city by a charming acquaintance who had lived there most of her adult life, but apparently, like many a native New Yorker, had never done the local equivalent of going to the top of the Empire State Building. When I wrote to her and asked if I could stop by, staying at a hotel, of course, while I was in the south of France, she offered to be my hostess and guide. She did a great deal more than that. She went to the local tourist bureau and picked up every brochure she could lay her hands on. She had maps, a daily plan, an itinerary, plans for where to eat, what to see, and what to do. She even moved into the hotel. I think that was a little extravagant, but I believe she knew the owners to keep a watchful eye on me on behalf of the family. We had a wonderful time. There was a great deal of fractured conversation, a lot of local rosé wine, and we were blessed by the warmth of the Provençal sun too early in the season to cook us. So run away from home with me and see the town as I did, with me, the armchair traveler, as your guide. Toulon exists because of both good and unhelpful geography. There are two really important features: an enormous sheltered natural harbor backed up by a very tall hill with views in every direction. Those two bits of geography explain why people likely settled here initially and still covered the area. What's missing? A river or any obvious way for adventurers, conquerors, or traders to move about freely between the coast and the hinterland. That meant that despite the geographic isolation from the interior, it could still serve as a safe harbor and a landing spot for anyone who happened to come this way, and a lot of people did. The hill also served as an ideal defensive outpost. You can see for miles. Mount Farron is the name of that hill. It overlooks the city and it's made out of limestone. It's believed that the word Farron probably comes from a Latin word, faro, that means lighthouse. That connection likely dates back to the Roman era when Toulon was an important port. While the exact date of the hill's getting its name isn't documented, it's thought to have been named for its significance in navigation and maritime activities going back for as long as we have written records and possibly even before then. La chaleur, or the warmth, is an accepted and expected part of life here in Provence, especially along the shore. Anyone living or visiting here adapts or roasts. When I visited, I was blessed with air conditioning, but that's a fairly recent development. Before that, people managed by living in buildings with thick walls, high ceilings, and very small windows to minimize heat gain. They used awnings, overhangs, and shutters, designed to minimize exposure to the sun during the heat of the day. The Provençal lifestyle means adapting to the hot Mediterranean climate with a slower pace of life, including the practice of taking siestas during the hottest part of the day, enjoying outdoor living spaces for meals and socializing when you can, and emphasizing fresh seasonal cuisine rich in fruits, vegetables, and olive oil, and nature-oriented approaches to life like hiking and walking and swimming. These perfectly suit the region's warm climate. Today, many but not all of the residents have added both double-pane glass windows and air conditioning to this mix, making this a far more pleasant place to live year-round. The shutters, shown here, however, live on. This is the Grand Hotel de la Gare, one of the few that still go by that name, out of many that sprang up as railway lines were built throughout France. Hotels located next to train stations have evolved significantly over the years, even during my lifetime, and they reflect changes in transportation, architecture, and hospitality needs. They play a vital role in accommodating travelers and making it easy to get to and from the railway stations. When I first visited France back in 1970, much of the country was still emerging from a post-World War II funk, and these hotels were where college students stayed when you didn't have much money and you weren't particularly choosy about what was included. In my experience, they were clean, safe, and had a sink in a room, and generally included a breakfast. There wasn't any air conditioning here in early 1970s France, and the toilet and shower were down the hall, so I learned how to take a cat bath out of a sink. Today, this is what's called a three-star hotel. A three-star hotel in France is considered comfortable, reliable, and well-equipped, but not especially fancy. If it's more than just 2 stories, it will have a working elevator, an important consideration nowadays for those of us with weak backs or aging knees. It may or may not have air conditioning. That's a requirement at the 4 or 5 star level. But in my experience in hot climates, especially here in the south of France, they generally do. I was told by my lovely hostess here in the city that the hotel has been in the same family for 40 years. It's been spiffed up quite a bit since I stayed, as you can see from this photograph of the lobby, but the same family still runs it. It was comfortable, and you really couldn't beat the location. I'm something of a fan of little trains, which can be found in many French cities, especially during the high tourist season. They're a handy way to get the lay of the land, especially if you don't feel like walking or it's pouring down rain when you first arrive, and come dressed up in disguise, usually with a tractor play acting as a locomotive. This one does a circuit near the port area and came complete, as they usually do, with a pre-recorded narration in several languages. I remember trying to listen to it in both English and French, and to be honest, I couldn't understand a word in either language. They really probably need to improve their sound system, or as an alternative, I should have brought my own headphones. It was a fun way to introduce myself to the city. Fort St. Louis, or San Luis, shown here from both land and harbor sides, was part of the fortifications of the city built in the 1660s by King Louis XIV and designed by a renowned military engineer named Vauban. Remember his name because we'll come across him again. The primary purpose of the fort was to protect the naval base here at Toulon, which was one of France's most important naval ports and still is. Its strategic location and robust design were essential for safeguarding the harbor against potential attacks. The fort was built out of thick stone walls with towers to provide a strong defensive position. Its elevated position allows for a commanding view of the harbor and enables it to control access to the port fairly effectively. The design not only served military purposes, but showcased the engineering skills of Vauban and the power and strength of Louis XIV. Throughout its history, the fort has played a crucial role in defending Toulon's naval base. It's been involved in various military conflicts, including both world wars. Today, the fort is recognized as a historical monument and serves as a symbol of Toulon's rich naval heritage. It's open to visitors and offers guided tours, along with stunning views of the harbor. Preservation efforts are ongoing to maintain the fort and educate the public about its significance. This map shows how it, along with the towers across the opening to the harbor, would have commanded the area. Mount Ferron is a striking limestone outcrop that towers over the surrounding countryside. It's close to 2,000 feet in elevation and contains a memorial and a museum, as well as jaw-dropping views of the city, the harbor, and the coastline. A geographic feature like this one will always have military value, and this Google Earth view gives you some idea of its position and layout. It presents a cliff face toward the harbor and on the north face as well. There is a road crossing the east shoulder, but getting to the top would be quite an operation, particularly if dug-in defenders were shooting at you. Such was the case in August 1944. After the Allied landings, and the French always refer to these as landings, never invasions, in Normandy, the landing forces were in desperate need of working harbor capacity. During the war, many of the northern French ports had been badly damaged. They would be repaired eventually, but eventually was sometime in the future. They also needed a port in the south. Toulon was selected to fill that role, and the Free French drew the task of retaking the city. The Germans may have initially believed they could defend Toulon effectively and indefinitely, but the overwhelming strength and coordination of the Allied forces, combined with the deteriorating conditions on the ground, ultimately led them to the realization that victory was not going to be achievable. The German in charge and his forces did manage to delay the Allies for nearly 2 weeks, during which time the German forces were able to retreat in an orderly fashion northward along the Rhone River. After intense fighting, the French forces captured Mount Ferron on August 24, 1944. This victory was very important as it allowed them to secure the city and the harbor. By August 29th, Toulon was fully liberated, marking a significant emotional and morale achievement for the Free French forces and contributing to the overall Allied efforts in the liberation of France. Within just a couple of weeks, the harbor was repaired, cleared, and fully operational. The only practical way for camera-toting tourists like me to get to the top of that hill is to ride the cable car. It's actually a lot of fun, even though I admit I'm not too crazy about heights. I spent the 7-minute or so ride uphill with one arm wrapped tightly around an upright stanchion and both hands holding my camera. It was worth the effort. The cable car has an upgraded waiting and ticket area and is handicapped accessible, as is the area in and around the debarkation memorial. The French nuclear aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle was in port the day I visited. The landing memorial located on Mount Ferron commemorates all of the Allied landings in Provence during World War II. This was called Operation Dragoon, and it was a significant event in the liberation of all of France from Nazi occupation. Inside, you'll find plaques dedicated to 3 leaders, Charles de Gaulle on the left, Franklin Roosevelt in the center, and Winston Churchill. Nearby are a couple of German tanks, a great view, and if you look carefully, some badly rusted barbed wire left over from the German defense of the area. The Fort de la Croix in Toulon was built between 1845 and 1851. It was built as part of the modernization of the city's defenses, following advancements in artillery and military technology. The fort sits on the slopes of Mount Ferron, and it faces in both directions. Its position allows it to oversee and protect the northern approach to Toulon and the surrounding areas, as well as the harbor, making it a very effective defensive structure. The vantage point was essential for monitoring any potential threats and for coordinating defensive actions when necessary. The fort's design and placement reflects the military strategies of the time, which emphasize the importance of high ground in fortification planning. It features a very robust 19th century style of architecture with thick stone walls and a layout that allowed for effective defense against all kinds of attacks. As the Allies were preparing for the liberation of southern France, the fort was used by German forces to monitor the movements of Allied troops in the region. Its elevated position on this hill provided a strategic advantage for surveillance. However, it also made it an easy target for Allied airstrikes. In August 1944, the fort was subjected to heavy bombardment. Despite its thick-walled construction, the airstrikes caused significant damage. After the landings and the subsequent liberation of the city, the fort, like many other military installations, was left in a state of disrepair. However, it remains here as a historical site that reflects the military history of Toulon and the effect of World War II on the region. Louis XIV chose to fortify Toulon in the late 17th century as part of his plan to strengthen France's naval defenses against rival powers, particularly Spain and England. The port was crucial for maintaining French naval power and securing maritime trade routes. Louis saw himself, properly I think, as surrounded by potential enemies and saw the port as important for maintaining his own power and that of the country. He commissioned Sebastien Vauban to build the fortifications here. Vauban's remit here was to enhance the city defenses, recognizing its strategic importance as a naval base. He designed and set up extensive fortifications that included bastion, walls, and other defensive structures. The design was aimed to create a stronghold capable of withstanding sieges and naval attacks, and for quite a while it did. The fortifications became essential during the War of the Spanish Succession to deter attacks and protect French interests in the Mediterranean. By the time of the French Revolution, however, things had changed. Toulon had become a stronghold for royalist forces opposing the revolutionary government, and in 1793 they were supported by British naval forces. Napoleon Bonaparte, then a young artillery officer, played a key role in the siege of Toulon, leading the French revolutionary forces to successfully recapture this city. The victory marked a triumph for the government, but it also marked a triumph for Napoleon himself and set the stage for his rise in the military. A few years later, he was named as a general. I spotted this plaque inside the gate. The text refers to Napoleon's departure to take command of the army of Italy in 1796. Napoleon's army there achieved significant accomplishments, including decisive victories against the Austrians and the acquisition of substantial territory. These successes boosted French morale and solidified Napoleon's reputation as a national hero. The triumphs of the army of Italy played a crucial role in Napoleon's rise to political power, setting the stage for his eventual accession as First Consul and later Emperor of the French. The Toulon Opera House was one of a wave of lyric opera houses built in France and in Europe in the middle of the 19th century. It is still one of the largest opera houses in France, but this is not the original building. Construction initially began in March of 1860 and came complete with a painted dome. It was unfortunately destroyed by fire in January of 1944 during World War II. The fire occurred as the result of bombing raids on the city of Toulon. The bombers aimed to target military installations and infrastructure, but unfortunately the opera house was caught in the destruction. The fire caused extensive damage, ultimately leading to the complete loss of the building. Following the war, efforts were made to rebuild the opera house, but they strung on for nearly 20 years. The new opera house, which we see today, opened in 1968. The original opera house had a dome and a painting, which of course went up in flames, but today's opera house has a dome painting designed by a man named Louis Duveau, who also created the ceiling of the Grand Salon in the imperial apartments of the Napoleon wing of the Louvre. The opera house seats 1,200 guests, and I can vouch for the quality of acoustics. I had a lovely evening there. The street markets here in Toulon, particularly those near the Opera House, are actually a lot of fun to visit in good weather. You get to see and meet all kinds of people. These markets typically offer a wide variety of goods, including fresh produce, local cheese, meat, seafood, flowers, bread. They also offer handicrafts for anyone who's looking for a souvenir. The atmosphere is fairly lively and the vendors are willing to talk to customers, so it's pretty friendly. The market is a kind of a social hub for locals where people gather not just to shop but to socialize and to enjoy the ambiance. In addition to the street markets, there is also a big indoor municipal market. It is housed in a distinctive concrete building that I wasn't too crazy about. The building opened up in 1970 and was designed to replace an older market that had been located in the same general area but was falling apart, and to provide modern space and amenities for both the vendors and the shoppers. This interior shot gives you some idea of how pretty it actually is. The new market was part of an effort to revitalize this part of the city and to improve the shopping experience for everyone. I've seen much worse modernist architecture in my time, and in obnoxious weather, or when it's really hot, would be a huge help for most shoppers. Toulon Cathedral is a national monument. Construction began here in the 11th century and finished in the 18th century. However, the first church on the site probably dates back to the 5th century, although there's no trace of it today. If the patterns we've seen in every other Roman imperial era settlement hold true, this is on or near the site of the ancient imperial Roman era forum. The cathedral is a prominent landmark in the city, although the area around it has been so heavily developed it is impossible to get a great photo of it. The building is a showcase and mix of architectural styles, which shouldn't be surprising considering that construction ran on for some 7 centuries. The present building was begun in 1096 by Guibert, the Count of Provence, according to tradition in gratitude for his safe return from the Crusades. The nave, shown here, sports rounded arches and thick walls that are typical of the Romanesque style. This is the Federation Fountain, located in a very pretty square called Place de la Liberté. This beautiful and extremely photogenic fountain and square not only serves as a lovely spot to relax, but also reflects the complex thoughts and feelings of the local citizenry during the tumultuous times of the French Revolution. This particular fountain stands out as a symbol of how perspectives can shift over time. When the French Revolution began in 1789, many in Provence resisted the counter-revolutionary government. They held on to their conservative values and expressed skepticism about some of the radical changes that were being proposed. By 1790, the idea of a federation of the French people was being celebrated nationwide, even if it wasn't fully embraced at the local level. Some local leaders and citizens doubtless joined in the celebrations, which likely included the construction of this fountain. However, whether their participation stemmed from genuine enthusiasm or mere acceptance of reality is up for debate. Fast forward to 1793, and Provence had become a hotbed for counter-revolutionary activity, particularly here in Toulon. The city, with its strong naval presence, was crucial for controlling the Mediterranean, and both sides coveted it. It was occupied by royalist supporters who proclaimed their ongoing fealty to the king, not the revolution, and went looking for help from Great Britain and anyone else they could get to listen to them. By August of that year, the British government dispatched a fleet to support the royalists. Commanded by Admiral Lord Hood, the British fleet arrived in Toulon and provided naval support against the advancing French Revolutionary Army. The army arrived in September and the siege was on. The British fleet was in the harbor, offering vital support to royalist defenders. Throughout the siege, the British provided bombardment and logistical assistance, allowing the royalists to hold out for several months. A young artillery officer was in that army. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte. We met him earlier. He played a pivotal role during this time. He was the man who hatched the scheme to capture the heights surrounding the city, which we visited earlier. By seizing those positions, the French could effectively bombard the city and the harbor and disrupt the loyalist defenses. In December of 1793, Napoleon's artillery units executed a well-coordinated bombardment of the city, using his tactical expertise to weaken the defenses and ultimately force their surrender. Today, this fountain retains its original name, honoring the Revolution, in a square honoring some not quite perfectly defined Lady Liberty. You have to wonder which Liberty the namers had in mind. This memorial didn't appear on my tourist map and needed quite a bit of digging for me to even understand. What you see here is a large memorial that looks like a blend of neoclassical and Art Deco styles. It comes complete with a massive female figure, several smaller figures, and separate dedications that have apparently been added over time. At the top, we see a woman draped in a large veil, extending her arms, possibly mourning or protecting her children. She seems to hold a shield, and I've read she may symbolize France. Below her is a row of soldiers and at least one sailor. Under their feet, the memorial inscription reads, "To the Toulonnais who died for their country," along with the dates for World War I, which was initially thought to be the war to end all wars. The memorial was dedicated sometime in 1925. After World War II, the monument was dedicated to include commemoration of those who died in that conflict. More plaques have been added over time to add others lost in later military engagements, such as the Algerian War and the war in Indochina. Some of those additions, particularly the ones related to the Algerian War, have sparked quite a bit of debate due to complex memories associated with those events. I was left wondering by those additions and the extra space. Did the designers and sculptor back in 1925 leave room because they wanted a pretty empty space? Or did they know, or at least suspected, that the 1918 armistice would not be the war to end all wars? Perhaps they knew something we didn't. We can't leave Toulon without sampling some of the local delicacies. For a snack, you can try a Provençal-style pizza, which includes onions, anchovies, and plenty of olives on a thick crust. For lunch, as a main course, you can't go away without trying out the bouillabaisse, which is generally served with thick slices of bread and a garlic sauce that features a lot of garlic. Marseille claims to have invented this tasty fish stew, but it's actually a regional dish that makes use of whatever the fishermen could bring home, either things that they couldn't sell or didn't sell. All that garlic, whether from the tart or the fish stew, demands to be covered up with a local dessert called the tarte tropézienne. This is basically a brioche bread split and filled with pastry cream and topped with sugar and sometimes fresh fruit, like sliced strawberries or raspberries in season. And with that and some rosé wine, it's time for us to bid farewell, not just to Toulon, but to the south of France. I hope you've enjoyed our visit here, but it's time for us to move on. Our next stop will be the Loire Valley, so come back and run away with me, the armchair traveler, as your guide.